school in the comment box below. Second, if you want to participate in today's discussion by answering my questions, feel free to use the comment box. If you also have questions in mind that you want to clarify, you may type your questions below and I'll try my best to answer it later. So our today's lesson is based on the most essential learning competencies in Science 6. It is to infer how friction and gravity affect movements of different objects. So at the end of this session, you learners must be able to first define frictional force and gravity. Second, identify kinds of friction. And third, give examples of effects of friction. We know that friction can be found anywhere. From this object on the palm of my hand up to the car running on the street. Friction is present. So if we will recall, how do we define friction? So let us try to fill the blanks with correct words. The force between rubbing surfaces is called blank. The blank down the movement of the objects. The blank surface produces more friction while blank surface produces blank friction. So let us try to answer this. You may type your answers in our comment box. So now, let's give the answers. The force between rubbing surfaces is called friction. Friction slows down the movement of objects. The rough surface produces more friction while smooth surface produces less friction. Good job! Friction is a force that opposes a motion between two surfaces sticking or touching together. It is the main reason why a certain object, when moving, will slow down and eventually stop. However, the amount of friction may vary depending on the type of surface the object gets in contact with. So, to further understand, let us take a look at this activity. So in the activity, what can we infer on the distance traveled by the marble in different surface? We can say that the marble traveled on the floor with smooth surface traveled farther compared to the marble traveled on the rough surface of the floor with sand. This implies that an object moving on a smooth surface has less friction. That is why it can travel farther compared to the object moving on a rough surface, which has more friction, making it travel shorter. So remember, if we want to lessen the friction between objects, an object must interact with a smooth surface. So friction is different kinds. Going back to the rolling marble, the kind of friction it possesses when it is rolling is what we call the rolling friction. Rolling friction produced when an object rolls over a surface. Less friction is needed to overcome rolling friction. So other examples of rolling friction aside from the rolling marble are the roller skates and skateboards. Next type of friction is the sliding friction. It is also known as the drying friction or kinetic friction. It occurs when two objects rub against each other or slide against each other. Sliding friction is intended to stop an object from moving. So one example is a refrigerator pushed along with the floor. The foot of the refrigerator rubs against the floor. More force is needed to push a refrigerator, especially when friction is greater. So to lessen the friction, what are we going to do? We tend to put wheels on the refrigerator to convert sliding friction to rolling friction, because rolling friction is easier to overcome as it requires less force compared to sliding friction. Another example is when we rub our palm or we rub the palm of our hands. Our hands possesses sliding friction as we rub them together. Sliding friction produces heat. So to lessen the production of heat, we may apply soaps to smoothen our palms to produce less friction. Soaps put a smooth layer of molecules in our hands. We may also put lubricants such as oil to lessen the friction between our skin. We put this between two surfaces to reduce friction. This is also the reason why machines need lubricants, especially oil, when operating. Lubricants reduce the friction and allows moving machine parts to slide smoothly past each other. Two cards and decks sliding against each other, and the friction between two books when sliding one into place on a bookshelf are also examples of sliding friction. So the third kind of friction is the fluid friction. It is the friction between moving objects and a liquid or between an object moving in the air. Best example of fluid friction is when you are swimming. The water from the pool or sea opposes your movement, making it hard to swim. Another example is when you throw a paper plane into the air. Air resists the movement of the paper plane. That is why it will fall and come to stop after some time. Air resisting an object to move is also an example of fluid friction. Last but not the least is the static friction. It is the friction that occurs in stationary objects or objects at rest. It is the friction that prevents an object from moving against a surface. All objects that you can see that are not moving possesses static friction. Your book on your table, your feet on the ground, and your cell phone on its stand are all examples of static friction. As you can see, we use friction in most of our activities. Friction brings desirable and undesirable effects. So, what are the desirable effects of friction? Friction allows us to grip. Without it, we cannot hold an object for a long time. Friction also helps people convert from one motion into another. With the help of friction, we can walk, then jog, then run, and go back to jog and walk. This movement would not be possible if friction is absent. Friction also converts some energy into heat, which is essential to us. But not all effects of friction are desirable. There are also undesirable effects of friction, and these are: first, it makes objects difficult to move continuously. To overcome friction, a lot of energy is wasted. Example is when we push a fully loaded pushcart on the grocery store. We must put a lot of force to continuously move the pushcart. Also, friction causes wear and tear of objects. Car tires become thin in the long run because of friction. Same with the sole of our shoes. It wears off after some time. You see, friction has advantage and disadvantage too. But can you imagine life without friction? What would happen if there is no friction that resists our movement? The friction that slows down and stops us. Without friction, it would be impossible to move in any direction other than down. We are no longer capable to walk, climb, and even grip things. When we try to slide, nothing will stop us. Therefore, we will slide all our life. And if suddenly we lose all friction, the only possible movement would be falling to a lower point under gravity. So, what is gravity? Gravity is the force that attracts a body toward the center of the earth, or toward any other physical body having mass. Since almost all object has mass, we are all attracted towards the center of the earth. Gravity pulls us down. This is the reason why when we throw an object upward, it will fall. The only question here is, which object will fall faster and which object will fall slower? So to answer this question, let us have another activity. In the activity, we use two objects with different weights. The piece of paper is relatively lighter compared to the tennis ball. So how do their weights affect the speed of their fall? Very good. The greater the mass, or the heavier the object is, the faster the fall. And the lesser the mass, or the lighter the weight of an object, the slower the fall with the presence of air resistance. We would not know any of this without the brain of one of the great scientists of all time, Sir Isaac Newton. He recognized that an apple fell straight down because the earth attracted it. The force that brought the apple crashing towards the ground also keeps the moon falling towards the earth and the earth falling towards the sun. And he called it gravity. He also hypothesized that the force on the apple is directly proportional to its mass. That is why the unit for force in the metric system is named after him, which is Newton. Gravity is also responsible why it is hard to go upstairs than downstairs. We are against the gravity. That is why we need to exert more force to overcome it when we are going upstairs. And when we are going downstairs, we are just following the direction of the gravity, making it easier to go down. What if there is no gravity? What would happen to the objects with mass? You are correct. We are no longer attracted to the surface of the earth and to other objects with mass. Therefore, we are just floating freely in the air, just like the astronauts on the outer space. All right, we got so much learning about frictional force and gravity or gravitation. So now, let us sum it up. Frictional force is a force that opposes a motion between two surfaces sticking or touching together. Friction can be found anywhere. Friction is greater in a rough surface and lesser in smooth surface. There is less friction, the faster the movement of an object, and if there is greater friction, the slower the movement of an object. We have different kinds of friction. We have friction for objects that roll over a surface, and we call it rolling friction. We also have friction that occurs when two objects rub against each other or slide against each other, and we call it sliding friction. A friction between moving objects and a liquid or between an object moving in the air is called fluid friction. And last but not the least is the friction that occurs in stationary objects or object at rest is called static friction. Adding wheels and rollers and putting lubricants and oils can overcome friction. We also learn another force, the gravity. It is a force of attraction between two objects or masses. It attracts us towards the center of the earth. The mass of an object dictates how fast it will fall. The heavier the mass, the faster it will fall, and vice versa. So going against the gravity requires more force to accelerate. This is the reason why going up is harder compared than going down. You are now fully equipped with knowledge that is needed to top score this short evaluation. So are you ready now? All you have to do is to put a smiley face if the statement is true and sad face if it is false. Ready? Then let's start. First one. Friction is greater in smooth surface compared to rough surface. A smiley or a sad face? The answer is sad phase. We know that friction is lesser in smooth surface and greater in rough surface. Good job. Second, dropping of a ball from third floor of the building creates fluid friction. So what is your answer? If your answer is smiley face, you got it right. Third, putting of lubricants into machines can delay the tearing and wearing down of its parts. Is it a smiley or a sad face? You are correct. Lubricants delay breaking down of machine parts. So, the correct answer is smiley face. Fourth, it is easier to climb a mountain than to slide down because of the pull of the gravity. The answer is sad face. We know that it is harder to climb a mountain because we are against the gravity. And if we are against the gravity, we need to exert more force. And lastly, an object with greater mass falls at greater speed, while object with lesser mass falls at lesser speed. So for the last one, the correct answer is smiley face. You did well, grade 6. All right. I know you still have questions in mind that you want to ask. Feel free to type your questions in the comment box. I will be waiting for your questions. So there is one question in the comment box. It says here, is it possible to have zero friction? No. Zero friction is not possible. We can be very close to it if we use very flat and smooth surface. We put wheels, lubricants, and all that we can put to lessen the friction. But we cannot make it zero friction. Zero friction means having no interaction. But we know that even just by waving our hands and air interacts with each other. So there is no chance of having zero interaction. Thank you for that wonderful question. So allow me to read another question in our comment box. How do rockets leave the Earth? How fast do they move? So a rocket must lift off fast enough to overcome the force of gravity. There is a computed speed on how to overcome the force of gravity. It is called escape velocity. And its speed is about 40,200 kilometers per second, if I may remember. So the rocket must accelerate at that speed so it can overcome gravity. So if you want to leave the Earth all by yourself, then you must start practicing to move at a speed of 40,200 kilometers per second. So comments are still coming in our comment box. Please reserve those unanswered questions to your science teacher in your follow-up discussion tomorrow. So don't forget to attend your follow-up discussion. So before we end this session, let me share to you this short line from Diksha Hain. Aside from gravity, nothing will let me down. What a perfect mindset amidst pandemic where everybody is tired, worried, anxious, and is already on the point of surrendering. If we can conquer gravity, what else can we conquer? Keep fighting and keep the positive mind. Everything shall pass. So once again, I'm Miss Sheila Jane C. Tesorero from Paso de Blas Elementary School, your Science 6 FB Live teacher, always reminding you to stay safe, stay indoors, and stay healthy. See you again next week in another Science Terrific episode here in Valenzuela FB Live. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for listening.